The New York Rangers are still looking for consistency as they fight for one of the wild card spots in the Eastern Conference. John Chik of Locked On New York Rangers is here to talk about how they got here and what it'll take to make the playoffs this year. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. It's great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On New York Rangers, John Chik. And John, Rangers finish up their West Coast swing with mixed results. What is it with this team as they look to find some consistency?
You know, they just, in some ways, I feel like a team is essentially just the sum of all of its parts. And when you've got a team here, and we're now 74 games into the season, if you're a fan of the New York Rangers, and when you have a team where every single player has regressed and or given you less or far less than what you expected, this is what the results are going to be. I mean, there's very few players on this team that I think are playing better this season than they did last season. Will Cooley is one of them. And unironically, Matt Rempe is another, although he did just suffer an injury and is out of the lineup. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line, it's kind of a multitude of things where they seem to have issues with their starts to games. They seem to have issues with their finishes to the games. They take a lot of bad penalties. The power play has just fallen off of a cliff. It's in a 2 for 35 slide, and it's been every bit as bad as those numbers would suggest. It's not like they're getting unlucky or anything like that. So, I mean, I don't know, man. It's just kind of one thing after the next, and it's just been a complete 180 this year compared to last year in terms of just how they play and just kind of the fight, the effort that they put forward. The effort has been very inconsistent from one game to the next. So kind of a minor miracle that they're still in it at all, but 8 games left. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the logical follow-up question is why? Who's to blame? How did we get to a point where a team that won the President's Trophy a year ago, that started the season with mostly the same personnel, ends up struggling for a playoff spot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of blame to go around. I think you can look anywhere from the players to the coaching staff to Chris Drury, a general manager. I feel like Drury in the offseason and then even in the start of the regular season, you know, he got rid of Barclay Goodrow and Jacob Trouba. And on one hand, he did what he felt like he had to do. And I don't really blame him for either one of those moves. I think either of them could have been handled with a little bit more of a human touch other than just kind of treating them like, you know, yesterday's news and just kind of forcing them out the door. But by that same token, I feel like a lot of players on this Rangers, guys that should know better, guys that are supposed to be the leaders of this team, took it way too personally. I mean, this is the NHL, man. And there's moves that have to be made. And they're not always fun. They're not always comfortable. And sometimes you do have to say goodbye to, you know, a popular member of your locker room, a veteran player, whatever it might be. And I feel like the players kind of sulked about that for a while. And, you know, they went through that miserable stretch in November and December where they were 4-15, and they've basically been playing catch up ever since. And they've been up and down since then. And I don't know, man, you know, the effort, it just kind of comes and goes with this team. And as far as Peter Laviolette goes, kind of some strange lineup decisions, you know, and strange time on the ice allotments to some of these players. But, you know, we'll see how it goes going forward. My biggest hope with this team, I think, is that Igor Shesterkin is still there. He's played well recently. And if they are going to somehow fight their way in and navigate what is a difficult schedule down the home stretch here, he's going to have to be one of the guys leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like on paper, if the Rangers do get in, you've got the goaltending, you know, you've got playoff experience up and down this roster. If they get hot at the right time, it seems like they could give anybody a hard time. And it also seems like they could easily get swept out.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not like overly optimistic, though, even if they do somehow squeeze in there, because this team has just had so many bad habits formed throughout this entire season. I mentioned the effort not too long ago. If they do get in, you got to figure they're up against the Caps, because I got to figure the Caps are going to be first in the Eastern Conference If the Rangers get in, they'll be the second wild card team. So there's your matchup. And the Caps have just been a much better team than the Rangers in just about every facet for the entire season. So, I'm thankful that at least they have a chance, and at least we're not at the point where I'm sitting here doing meaningless games. For other Locked On hosts, they're not so lucky. Some of their teams have been kind of dead and buried in the standings for a long time. At least the Rangers are in it. But, man, just a colossal disappointment of a season. Never would have thought that this is where we would be after what happened last year. I mean, maybe not back-to-back President's trophies, but, man, I mean, they were at least going to be in the mix. They were going to be comfortably in a playoff spot, and as we see, that's just not reality this season. Like I said, pretty much everybody has taken a step back, and here we are.
How do you think the team handles this situation in the offseason if they barely get in or if they miss? Who takes the fall, if anybody?
Yeah, I think the only way that they won't aggressively retool this team, and the only way that Peter Laviolette can possibly save his job, is if this team was to somehow barely squeak in and then win at least a round or two. Because if they just make the playoffs but lose in 4 or 5 games in the first round, that's not really going to change anything as far as the big picture here. So the chances of that, based on what I've seen this season, what I just described, are very, very slim. And I think that once this season ends, you probably will see the Rangers go in a different direction as far as the head coach is concerned, because, he just hasn't had any answers this season. There's been too many third period collapses. There have been too many no-shows. And while I do put the blame for that on the players more so than I put it on Peter Laviolette, at some point, I mean, that's the coach's job, man. You got to have these guys ready to go. They got to be out there, playing with some urgency, especially now when in theory they're fighting for a playoff spot. So yeah, man, if they miss it or they go out early, Peter Laviolette's probably going to be gone. As far as Drury, I mean, I feel like that one could go either way. I do feel like he's got a little bit more rope than Peter Laviolette. But even if they stick with Drury, his seat is going to be getting hot too, because he'll be hiring his third coach in the last 4 seasons. We had the last year of Gallant and Laviolette for 2 years, and then whoever else comes in here next. So I can't imagine he's got a whole lot of rope left, but I feel like Drury is kind of sold Dolan and whoever it might be on this idea that they can retool this roster aggressively and not have to go full on tear down rebuild. And we've seen them already take some steps in doing that, acquiring JT Miller and several other players as well. So we'll see how it goes, but I feel like Laviolette probably is not back next year. I think Drury probably will be, though.
Give me some reasons for hope. We know Shesterkin will have to step up down the stretch. Who else needs to lead this team if they're going to make a playoff run?
Well, one guy who I think is already doing it is Artemi Panarin. I got done talking about him on the episode that I recorded a little bit earlier today here. He closed out the month of March with 10 goals and 10 assists in just 15 games. Absolutely on fire. And in a season where very few veterans have stepped up in any kind of a meaningful way, he has. And he's done it at a time where they need him more than ever. I mean, every game is just so big when your team is a fringe playoff team. And it's such a unique situation because there's basically 5 teams for one spot at this point. So, man, you got to just keep winning and winning and winning. And Artemi Panarin is bringing it every single night. JT Miller, too, ever since the trade. Would love to see more from guys like Chris Kreider, Alexis Lafreniere, Mika Zibanejad. But based on what we've seen from those 3 players for the majority of the season, I'm not exactly holding my breath. Mika at least got hot for a little while there after the trade for JT Miller. But very, very disappointing season for the 3 of them for sure.
Any injured players who may be back for the last 8 games or part of them?
Not really. I mean, Matt Rempe just had the injury. I believe he's currently week to week. I don't think there's anybody that's coming back all that soon, but they're just have to roll with what they have. They will still have some interesting lineup decisions to make. There's kind of a revolving door as far as the last defenseman and who's the healthy scratch. Carson Soucy, acquired at the deadline, was actually a healthy scratch for I believe it was 3 games in a row there. And recently, Vakanainen had been out of the lineup, and now it's Zach Jones. So they've got some options, but there's no guy that's going to come in and make a massive difference at this point in the season. They are what they are. They have the players that they have. One guy I will say that I'm impressed with him recently is Brandon Hoffman, and they're starting to use him with Artemi Panarin and Vincent Trocheck. He's willing to go to the net, use his physicality, and that's been a lot of fun. It's not really showing up on the score sheet all that much recently, but he's giving them some snarl that they desperately need.
All right. Well, it's going to be an interesting stretch drive for sure. John, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, you can find Locked On Rangers there too. We are on YouTube, and you can find me on social media at jchik17.
All right, John, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
All right, thanks, Gil. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on, and the FanDuel app is so simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long as we head toward the Final Four. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Check it out today.